Hello, and welcome back to Deep Dive with Dan Jones. This is our fourth and final segment of our interview with retired Command Master Chief Justin Gray.
Um, there's a book called Legacy about the New Zealand All Blacks, which is the winningest rugby or professional sports team in history in any sport on any continent ever.
Okay.
So, how do you achieve that level of dominance for generations? Like, because a rugby player's generation is short, right? Like, it's a rough sport.
Yeah, it's a rough sport. Yeah.
So you don't see people in that league for like 20 years, right?
Yeah.
So how do you achieve that level of dominance, right? And it's not always picking the best player. They're very, very clear in the book. Like, we have passed over far more talented athletes because they don't fit the culture.
Right.
They don't fit what we're trying to do.
Yep.
And in that case, yeah, you might have the best IT guy ever,
Right.
but he only wants to run DOS, right?
Right.
Or pick at something, right?
Right. Yeah.
Like, he will not move.
I think the IT people that are watching this are laughing at us.
Yeah, they're like DOS.
DOS, what's that?
But you still, if they're not willing to buy into the vision, then you could part amicably, right?
Right.
But you need to part.
You need to part. Exactly.
If you don't think you can get them there in a reasonable period of time,
Yeah.
because at worst, they're actively sabotaging you,
Right.
right? At best, they're an anchor, right? You're dragging them all along the way.
Yeah, exactly. And it's very frustrating. So I want to kind of back up a little bit, and back into the Chiefs. The Navy has a because we are kind of talking about just now somebody that's difficult, not willing to come along. But the viewers might be interested in how the Navy coaches their errant sailors in the Chiefs mess.
Yeah, so
It's very different, than the Army, and I really just think it's so unique, and I want to explore it a little bit.
yeah, so what we have is a disciplinary review board. So when a sailor gets in trouble, usually it's very few people wake up in the morning going, man, how am I going to screw up today?
Right.
Right. They get up, they want to do a good job, great American, gonna come to work and do the best they can. And then something happens, right? So we'll have a disciplinary review board where we gather all of the chiefs, or as many as are available. And we'll bring the sailor in and we'll read them their rights.
Right.
Right. We'll go over what they're charged with, because you don't arrive at a disciplinary review board unless you've been placed on report for a violation of some article of the Uniform Code of Military Justice.
Right. Okay.
So sailor comes in, maybe it's the fifth time they've been half an hour late to work. So first time they're like, hey, why are you late to work? Don't let it happen again. Next time the chief's like, hey, why are you late to work? Don't let it happen again. Third time, all right, what's going on? I didn't set my alarm clock, whatever.
Right.
So when it arrives at, okay, now I have to do something to correct this behavior. And the goal of disciplinary review board is to correct the behavior. So you have a disciplinary review board, you have executive officers inquiry, which is a part of a legal proceeding to determine, do I need to punish you for your behavior?
Okay.
Right. And when you get to non-judicial punishment or captain's master, you are being punished for your behavior. Right. So it's not really a correction at that point.
Right.
It's punitive.
Yep.
Right. And it's supposed to be. Right.
Yep.
So this is like a step
To try and
to
avoid that.
try to avoid that.
Right.
If I can correct your behavior.
Right.
Through extra military instruction, right? Or if I can get you back on the path or uncover the underlying cause of why you're doing this,
Right.
then we can prevent you from arriving at punishment. So we'll get everybody in the chief's mess, bring the sailor in, do all the legal piece, and then ask them to explain themselves, right? And you will have, and this sometimes you do get yelled at disciplinary people,
Right.
right? And nobody there is angry, right? To
Right.
your point, like
Right.
a lot of it is theater,
Mm-hmm.
right? But you have a broad spectrum of people from a broad spectrum of backgrounds and experiences, and they can come at this sailor from every direction.
Right.
Right? Like, you were late for work 5 times. Why are you late for work? Well, my car quit. Well, why'd your car quit?
Right.
Well, because I didn't have gas in it. Well, why didn't you have gas in it? Because I spent all my money at the strip club.
Right.
Why were you at the strip club? Right. So then you get just peel back down the onion to try to get to, why does this sailor find themselves on report? Right. And sometimes the answer is bonehead, right?
Yeah.
At the end of the day, sometimes the answer is
Well,
bonehead.
I mean, you and I both, we did some boneheaded stuff when we were coming up,
So, but ideally, in like 80% of the cases, you're like, oh, you don't have childcare.
Right.
Right. Or, oh, I need to get you down to some financial counseling because you can't pay any of your bills and they turned off your power.
Right.
Right. Or because nobody comes forth and says, I'm failing at life.
Right.
Right. Like
Yep.
the rudiment.
Yep.
A sailor tell me, like, my mom taught me I'm not out of money. I still have checks.
Right.
I got like 42 collection notices sent to the command because she bounced checks to them.
Right.
Right. So that, because you're also dealing with people from a broad spectrum of backgrounds and areas. And so that whole proceeding really, in about half the cases, like, dismiss them.
Right.
Right. And also I told my commanding officers, this is a conversation when I would have with them, like, as the command master chief, like, if I don't have the power to dismiss a case at DRB, then I'm not holding it.
Right. Okay. Yeah. Yeah.
So over the course of that conversation, right, you either arrive at the truth,
Right.
right, which either clarifies the charges,
Right.
adds to the charges, or we identify the root cause and we're actually able to correct it without the sailor actually having to be punished.
Right.
So it is a very good tool, when done right. There's certainly been, it's an environment that could be abused.
Yeah.
Right, but most, that doesn't happen.
I think for me, what resonated the most with it was, and you touched on this a little bit earlier, is that, chances are, I think how you'd said it to me one time when we were talking about it, chances are that some chief has experienced that same problem and now knows how to communicate getting out of that situation. Because like you said, you got a broad range of chiefs all sitting in there with different experiences. So, bringing everybody together in a collaborative effort just to focus on fixing this one sailor, this is your pet project for today.
Yeah.
I think is really just a beautiful way to correct behavior and try to avoid having to punish people, because nobody, well, no sane person, no decent person wants to have to punish people,
Right.
if it can be avoided.
And sometimes, accountability equals punishment, right?
Yeah.
Sometimes the level of offense rises to, hey, you slept on watch.
Right.
Right? Like, you were supposed to be watching this piece of equipment as we were exiting the harbor.
Yeah.
and you were asleep.
Well, yeah,
And so the level of accountability that comes along with that is you get punished.
and sometimes, the people that have done something wrong, if they won't take the accountability for it, just means that you've got to punish them. And I remember, this is 15, 18 years ago, something like that. One of my guys at the company down in Florida, wrecked one of my trucks, right? And it was clearly his fault, because it was 2 lanes going this way, 2 lanes going that way. He's sitting in a side street. The car closest to him stopped. So he thought that meant he could cross all these other lanes of traffic and pull out. And of course, pulls out right in front of, big truck, boom, smashes it. Thankfully nobody was hurt. Lost the truck, lost the equipment and stuff on it. But I'm at the scene, I'm checking on the guys, and then the police officer comes over to me and he goes, this was an accident. He goes, I'm trying to avoid writing your guy a ticket. He goes, but he keeps telling me it was the other guy's fault because he waved him out into the road. And I'm like, what? And he goes, yeah, he's saying the car stopped and waved him out, so it's his fault. And he goes, if he won't accept responsibility for it, I'm going to write him a ticket because I need him to learn, just, can you bear with me a minute? Let me go talk to him and see. I went over and I said to the guy, and I'm like, this cop's going to write you a ticket, and he doesn't want to, but you won't admit that you did anything wrong. Well, I didn't do anything wrong. You did something wrong. You did, legally. I mean, if you look in, all the books that they give you, to learn how to drive, you were the one that was wrong. And now you need to admit it so that you can learn. Because if you won't admit it, he's going to teach you by taking money out of your pocket, And so finally, he got himself, right. And then went over and said to the police officer he was sorry, and he recognized now that he had done something wrong. But, being able to be taught that lesson and the humility to say, okay, I needed to learn something else, gave him the ability to hopefully be a better driver. Well, he never wrecked another one of my vehicles, but he did become a more careful driver after that, and I think it was really good of the police officer not to just arbitrarily write him this ticket, I think a little bit of grace and leadership is important, because we need to remember where we were when we were younger, the mistakes that we made, and try and give that, to the next generation also.
Yeah, absolutely. One of the things I would tell every sailor that checked into my command was, I will back you up as long as you don't lie to me.
Right.
Right? If you lie to me, all bets are off. Right? Because I don't have time to figure out who's telling me the truth and who's not. So I'm going to assume that you are,
right,
until you prove otherwise. And it's easy to say that, but then you have to mean it. So I had a sailor that engaged the brake on the propulsion turbine while we were underway. Doing a maintenance procedure, very first step of the maintenance procedure says ensure turbine is shut down.
right,
We're moving through the water at like 20 knots. And he engaged the power turbine brake, which caught and made a fire. Like, it made a fire in the engine room. It caught, a couple of sailors got smoke inhalation. It did about $100,000 worth of damage to the turbine. But he immediately went to the controlling station and said, I did this. Like,
right,
this was me.
yeah,
And that kid did not get punished.
right,
Right? That he made a honest mistake, shouldn't have made it.
right,
But by coming forward and saying that he did it, we didn't have to go through hours and hours of phantom troubleshooting.
right,
Of
right,
why
right,
did this brake engage?
right, yeah, right. It must have been something with the manufacturer, right?
Right.
Yeah.
To get to the same answer. Now, if he'd have lied about that, that's a whole different story.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, I agree with you. I would often tell people that have worked for me, and that I do not care if you make a mistake. I don't, because that's how you're going to learn. Now, I mean, I don't want you to make a mistake that's going to hurt somebody, but I don't care if you make a mistake. The only thing I care about is if you make the same mistake again. So you make a mistake, come tell me about it. I'm not going to yell at you. And once people started to realize that I meant what I said, that when they saw somebody make a mistake and that person come and tell me about it, and then I'd be like, okay, well, what did you learn? How are we going to avoid this in the future? What change are you going to make? Once that happened, then people were not afraid of making mistakes, and they wouldn't try and hide them, and then we could fix problems a heck of a lot easier, and not every mistake is, a turbine on a warship, but I mean, a mistake could be, something simple that, $15-20, but that $15-20, if it happens day after day after day, starts to add up, so yeah, having an environment where people, understand that honesty will be met with understanding and appreciation, and the ability for them to learn is, God, I think that's so important towards propelling growth, uh, personal and, business wise.
Yeah, you have to be able to receive the way you receive bad news
Right.
is a defining quality of a leader.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
If you can't be brought bad news, no one will tell you anything. And you will be in the dark.
Yep. You'll be surrounded by yes men, and that's the absolute worst thing that I think you could want.
Yeah, and you'll have problems that could have been solved when they were little, right? Suddenly become the giant problem, right? Like,
well, I think history kind of proved that out, and now we're going to go back to like the Soviet Union. But one of the chief reasons the Soviet Union failed is you would get punished if you weren't meeting the quotas that were set by the committee, right? So nobody wanted to get punished. So if they were told that they were going to produce 100,000 TVs that month, they would say that they produced 100,000 TVs that month, even though they hadn't. And so now there's 100,000 people standing in a store waiting for their TVs, but there's only 10. Right. This is kind of what created those lines, because everybody thought. But the reason that system started to break down is because the people were motivated to be dishonest.
Sure. Yeah. The incentive structure was set up so that you were rewarded for lying.
Right.
The other thing I think that kind of goes hand in hand with that as a leader is that bad news doesn't get better with time.
No, right. Yeah.
Right. So you have to address bad news or deliver bad news in the immediacy. Right. Like firing somebody doesn't get easier 3 weeks from now.
Nope.
Right. Still gonna suck.
Yep.
Still going to be an emotional event for both parties. Right. Unless you're just heartless. Providing negative feedback doesn't get better later.
Right.
So I used to have that written on the board in my office, like bad news doesn't get better with time.
No, it doesn't. So, but it's funny, because I had fostered this environment of, look, if there's something bad, just tell me about it. Don't tell me I want to talk to you at the end of the day, or, no, whatever it is, I want to hear it now. But apparently for this one employee of mine, I should have given him a caveat, because a couple of my people were out working, and one of them ended up having an accident and cut the top of his foot off. And the first phone call that the leader of that team made was to me. And my first question was, I'm like, oh my God, so are the fire department and the ambulance there? I haven't called them yet. Okay, hang on a second.
Hang up.
Like, get off the phone, call 911. I'm on my way. He had taken to heart so much how I'd said, I want to know the bad news up front, that he'd actually, called me before he called the fire department. But that bad news thing, I've heard the story. I tell people now, eat the frog. Have I told you that before? If I woke you up tomorrow morning and I said, here's a frog, and you have to eat it before the end of today, or something terrible is going to happen to you and all your family. Okay. What are you going to do?
Just eat the frog.
Just eat the frog. Right. But a lot of times people will be like, oh my God, I don't want to eat a frog. It's still alive. And, so they're going to, I'm going to eat that frog because I don't want anything to happen to my family. After I do this, after I do that. In other words, they keep pushing off that unpleasant task. Well, there's something psychological that starts to happen with that. When you know that you've got that unpleasant task, no matter what it is that you have set up, maybe it's something to take your mind off. I don't want to think about how I have to eat the frog. So I'm going to go play on my Xbox, with some of my friends. You will not fully enjoy that experience because always in the back of your mind is, I have to eat that frog or bad things are going to happen.
Yeah.
Right. So if you wake up in the morning, whatever your frog is for that day, for me, is sometimes it might be, I've got to call a customer that, had a problem. I don't want to do it because I know they're a difficult person. And, it's just everything's always like, a big deal with them. Just take care of it first thing in the morning. I got to fire somebody, do it first thing in the morning. Whatever that bad task is, just get it out of the way. And then you can focus on the rest of the day.
Yeah. That's good advice.
Yeah,
for sure.
Yeah. So, well, I appreciate this very, very much. You have a lot of information. Is there anything else you'd like to add into this?
No, thanks for the opportunity. Yeah, just I guess as you think about, I guess it's really a topic of leadership, right?
Right.
Is like there, I don't believe there's anything as a natural born leader, right? There are people with a lot of charisma, right? People that people like,
Right.
right? But just because people like you doesn't make you a leader.
Right.
So it's a continuous journey,
Mhm.
right? And you always have to be genuine to what works for you,
Right.
right? Some people are cheerleaders, and that's the way that they go out and like, hey team,
Right.
way to execute that task. You're great. Give me a high five, right?
Yep.
And that works for them.
Yeah.
If you're an introverted person, that will not work for you.
No.
Right. And everyone will see that you're faking.
Yep. Yep.
Right. So whatever leadership, I guess 2 points, whatever leadership style works for you, hone it, deliver it, be the best at it. You can adopt some traits of other ones, but don't ever try to fake it.
Right.
Because it
Yep.
comes off as contrived.
Yep.
Right. And the second thing I think that every person deserves from their leader is consistency.
Okay.
If you respond to this way today, that better be the way you respond to it up front.
Yeah. No, I can agree with that.
Right.
Yeah.
Because there's nothing worse than walking into the office and go, oh, is it a north day for the boss or a south day for the boss?
Yep.
Right.
Yep.
Because that will instantly impact productivity minute one.
Right.
Right. So be consistent, be true to who you are, right? And your personality, right? And be consistent. And then everything else is kind of like feeds into those couple of things, right? Vision,
So
communication.
you talking about being true to yourself, because I repeat this over and over again in conversations with people when I'm talking about leadership, and I'd said this in one of my shorts a couple days ago. I believe in continual learning and exposing yourself to other ideas that other people have. So I was talking with another consultant about a week ago, and we were talking about leadership. And I'd asked him, I said, "Do you think that people are, is it from the Malvolio, from 12th Night, right? Some are born to greatness, some aspire to greatness, and some have greatness thrust upon them." And so is leadership, are you born with it, or is it a learned trait? You're saying that it's a learned trait. I think it's a learned trait. And here's why. The leadership skills that I've learned are the ones that resonate with me. In other words, I'm like, oh, that sounds like, something I would want to do. Right. So I learned that skill. I wasn't born with it. I learned it because it resonated with me. And as you expose yourself to more stuff, you find what resonates, you find what doesn't. Because we didn't get to the topic of like, what did you, well, we basically touched on it, but learning from bad leaders what not to do. But that resonates with you in a negative fashion also. So
Yeah, and then you also have, make sure your toolbox is full of tools.
Yeah.
Right?
Yep.
Like if all you got in there is the busted crescent wrench, right?
Yeah.
That's good for one size,
Right.
then all you do is round everything off when you try to use it for anything else,
Right.
right?
Yep.
So I think a lot of times leaders get stuck in that, right? Like this works, or this
Right.
this works for you. Why doesn't it work for John?
Right. Well, because
Right.
people learn different. Right.
And
There's-
yeah, it could be anything, right? John may have come from an abusive home, and as soon as you scream at him, he shuts down.
Right. Yep.
Right? Or raise your voice in the slightest,
Yep.
he shuts down. He needs to be talked to in a different way, right? He needs to understand from a different direction. So you do have to make sure you expose yourself to these different things. Because even if you were a natural born, if there was such thing as a natural born leader, right?
Right.
They would only be able to lead
certain types of people. Right. Yeah. By not by not having in the toolbox, as you're saying. Yeah. I found that it's really important trying to assess one, how a person learns. And then two, like, understanding their personality type a little bit. And some of that comes through conversation, like, hey, where are you from? What's your life like? And as you get to know people, you start to understand things more. So then you can kind of understand better ways to express to them the things that you're trying to get, or things that maybe you're upset about in a way that they can hear it. So yeah, that's a good point. So what are you reading right now?
So I'm actually reading a book by David West, who, and the only reason I'm reading it is because he was at the farmer's market selling it.
Oh, okay.
Right. So he was he's like, we started chatting, and he had been in the Navy in the nuke program before, and he had developed a video game, which then inspired him to write the story.
Right.
And I read the first book, it's pretty good. So I'm reading the second book.
Say fiction.
Yeah, fiction.
Yeah, okay,
Yeah, fiction. So that's what I'm reading at the moment. I know one of the things that you said is like, hey, what books do you like to read, or would you recommend?
Yeah.
So I wrote down a couple. Legacy is one of them.
You mentioned that earlier. Yep.
Leaders Eat Last by Simon Sinek.
Yep. Good book.
That's a good book. Talking about, servant leadership, right? That Descent into Darkness by Edward Rayner.
Okay.
And that book, it's about a diver in World War II. Shows up to Pearl Harbor, relatively young guy, maybe 26 years old, 24, 26 years old. Shows up in Pearl Harbor, and the ships are still on fire.
Right.
Right. Like they flew him in from California, and he walks up to the salvage officer who's like, got ships on fire.
Right.
Like, hey, I'm here. What do you need me to do? He's like, I need you to grab that, barge. You need to put it. I need you to go over there. You need to install an air compressor on it because it's all air fed diving, right?
Right.
I need you to take that case of dynamite. I need that quay wall blown up, and I need you to figure out how we're gonna sound these holes to find survivors. Go. Right. And I like this book because here's somebody that hasn't been told how to do something. So like, I just need you to do this.
Right.
You've never used dynamite before, right? Never done any of this stuff, but the expectation is thrust upon him, so he figures it out, right? How to get all of these things done. And in the course of these things, like this is the group of people that developed like underwater cutting torches.
Right.
So I like that book for that reason. Like there's a lot of leadership lessons, I guess, in the book.
Okay. Yeah.
But it's a story about this guy, but in there is a lot of organizational and leadership lessons.
Okay.
Freedom's Forge by author Arthur Herman, which is about how the US got ready for World War II because Roosevelt saw it coming.
Right.
So he hired Kaiser, who actually Kaiser Permanente, the insurance company, is named after
Okay.
him
Right.
because he's the first guy to actually give his employees insurance.
Okay.
But he built a shipyard and was building ships in 9 months.
Okay.
And then the other guy was Knutson, who was vice president of Ford, who came over to figure out how to get the commercial industry involved in the war effort.
Right. Yep.
And also became the first person to ever be commissioned directly as a general. Later at the end, toward the end of the war. But there's a lot of good lessons in there about what is possible if you really want to do something.
Want to do something, yeah.
And then I like Make Your Bed by Admiral William McRaven.
Right. That's a great speech. That speech, I will watch it at least once a year. I just think, it's like so to the point. Doesn't matter what your day is going to be like. At least you can say I did one thing.
I did this thing.
Yeah. Because I mean, some days, it's just, you might as well just turn around and go back home. It happens sometimes. You can't run it 100% all the time, and after, like you go outside, the tire's flat on the vehicle, there's an accident up the road, just turn around and go home,
Yeah.
because guess what? Your bed's already made, you just get back in it and watch Netflix,
You can look at it and see that you did something.
Yeah.
The book is really small,
Okay.
right? And it is an expansion on the speech.
Okay.
And it really lays out some really good lessons. One of them is sometimes you're just a sugar cookie, suck it up and move on. Right. Which sugar cookies are when they go out on the beach all wet and they make you do calisthenics in the sand.
Okay.
Right. And that's you screw up, you dump your boat, you're like,
Right.
all right, go out there and make sugar cookies.
Right.
Right.
Yeah.
And sometimes, you're a sugar cookie.
Yep.
Right.
Yep.
And that's just the way it is.
Yep.
And suck it up and move on.
Yep.
Right. Don't dwell on it. So there's 8 or 10 lessons in there. Short book. It's like a day read but it's really if you take the time to kind of see how each one of those lessons would apply to your life, it goes a long ways. So yeah, love the speech.
Yeah.
Think the book is probably, obviously the speech is him, right? But the book is really good. Maybe better at like getting into why he said what he said.
Right. Yeah. Okay. Well, thanks again. I appreciate it.
No problem.
Thank you for joining us. This was Deep Dive with Dan Jones. Please subscribe to our channel for more updates, and we look forward to seeing you in the future.